How long have we got? 4 minutes. Moment. See how clever you are. Yeah, I found it. I was trying to find out how to get the battery. Hello, welcome to another biology topic by topic. We're looking at today communicable diseases, which is probably quite apt considering the current situation with the COVID-19 epidemic going on. Pandemic. Right, so let's go in and find out basically what things enable us to become ill and the situations that we sort of have there. We find there are all sorts of things that can cause us problems, but generally communicable diseases are one of the main things and one of the main killers for people. Let's have a look at some of this. So what we've got this idea that things make us ill, and generally the things that make us ill can be either divided up into communicable diseases and basically non-communicable diseases. And we need to sort of be aware of the difference between these things. But either way, there are usually other things that contribute to making us ill. We've obviously, with communicable diseases, I just don't go down with every communicable disease that's around, because if I don't come into contact with them, I'm not going to get them. And this is the idea of COVID-19 at the moment, this idea of social distancing. If you don't come into contact with someone, you don't get the disease. So let's look at what makes us ill though. We've got both of these things going on, but there are also other factors that affect people's health. And the first of these is diet. Diet really does affect people and how they basically get ill. If you are getting enough to eat, the right amount of nutrients, then you're generally better off. If on the other hand you're too fat, then you're more likely to get ill. So too much and too little causes problems. And to go with diet, which is getting the right amount of food, we also have to think about vitamins. And there's many a child who's told by their parents to take multivitamins because it's going to make them better and it's going to keep the colds away. Vitamins are exactly the same as diet. Too much can be harmful to you, and too little can also be harmful to you. Too much in the way of vitamins, and this can cause serious problems. But not enough vitamins can also cause serious problems. If you don't get enough vitamin A, you can actually go blind. And you think, well, that's not going to happen, but it depends on what you eat. Some people eat foods with very little in the way of vitamins, and fast foods are renowned for their normal lack of vitamins. An old story that I was familiar with many years ago was that eating cornflakes, you probably got as much nutritional stuff from eating the packet as you did by eating the cornflakes. So manufacturers changed the way the products worked, and they added vitamins to it. And there's a really nice experiment to see that you've got vitamins in something like cornflakes. One of the things they put in nowadays is iron. And if you take some cornflakes, just one or two, you put them in a bowl containing, it'd be nice milk, but water will do just as well. And you take a magnet. And if you take a magnet to this, you find that some of your cornflakes are magnetic. They've got iron in them, usually in the form of something like iron filings. It works. So diet is important, but it's not the only thing that affects things. Stress is one of the all-time killers. We have a certain amount of stress, but we need stress. We need things to drive us, to keep us going. But too much stress, and we have exactly the same problem as before. A little stress is good for you. And I hear a lot of students tell me, oh, they're too stressed to do this, they're too stressed to do that. But when you relieve them of all stress, you find that they can't do other things or anything. So we need some stress to function properly, and that's good for us. But too much stress, and this can bring in a whole range of health problems, from heart disease, mental health problems, and so on. We've got our life situations. You can't do too much about some of these. Where are you born? Which part of the world do you live? Your gender, your financial status, your ethnic group, the amount of health care provided where you live, maybe how many children you have, and that can also be how many brothers and sisters you've got to compete with you, and things like sanitation, sewage, rubbish disposal. Generally, people have very little or no control over their life situation. Especially if you're a child, you can't suddenly say, I want to live in a different part of the world, I want to suddenly be rich. Well, actually, students do say that, of course, don't they? But it can't happen. Where you live in the world can influence the amount of communicable diseases that you have. If you live in areas where there's lots of malaria, then you've got a problem. And nowadays we've got a problem that it doesn't matter where you're living, you're not being able to escape the dreaded coronavirus. So how do all these health problems interact? Well, let's see what we've got. Let's take an example. We've got a virus in the community. Now, what does the virus do? Viruses can do very, very many different things, but basically what they can do is they invade a cell. They take over the cell, and they can do one of two things. They can either make lots of virus, and when they do that, they can go on and basically kill. The other option is they can be basically absorbed into your genome. And at this point they can decide to come out at any time they like. One example of this would be the dreaded chickenpox. If you get chickenpox when you're young, very young, you basically have a few spots and it doesn't last very long and it's not very pleasant. If you manage to get chickenpox when you're a little bit older, and I certainly managed to do that, I managed to get chickenpox when I was 21, and the doctor popped along to see me and he said, Philip, you're going to be ill. And believe me, he was right. Even my spots seemed like they had spots, and I was really ill for quite a considerable amount of time. We can't escape those things, but the chicken pox went away. It went away with lots of these kids, but it didn't. It's still there, and at any time it can decide to flare up and someone gets shingles. And occasionally some people actually get another disease related to this, zoster. And as far as I know, zoster is 100% fatal. What can you do? So we've got viruses. Now, what can help you against viruses? The only thing that can help you is your immune system. There are not really many drugs that we can use to try and help combat viruses. If your immune system is 100%, and generally that also means being young, but not too young, then your immune system is probably working effectively and it will almost certainly manage to take out the virus. But it's a race. Will your immune system take out the virus before it kills you? If your immune system's not so good, then the virus may kill you before your immune system gets a handle on it. And so what we're doing in hospitals at the moment with the coronavirus is that many people are put on some type of life support system, ventilators to help them breathe because they're not getting enough oxygen into their system because the virus is damaging the lungs. And if you can keep them going, then their immune system may win in the end. But the older you are, the less likely your immune system is to be 100%. The older you are, maybe you've got, as well as this, other health problems. And if you've got other health problems, then this virus is going to stand a better chance of harming you. The health problems come in two. There's mental health problems and there's physical health problems. Physical health problems we can do quite a lot about. Mental health problems often lead to things like depression. And if you have got lots of depression, then it affects your immune system, which means the virus can probably kill you more easily. How about malnutrition? Malnutrition is a problem in quite a lot of the world. Malnutrition is linked to health problems because you've got the deficiency diseases such as the vitamins. We've got other problems which are going to affect your immune system, so you've got a weakened immune system. Malnutrition can affect things like your basic health problems, not necessarily here obesity, but lack of food or the right type of food can affect you and can cause or lead to things like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and even cancer. And let's not forget the environment. And I suppose your lifestyle. Your lifestyle is what you choose, where you go, what you do. If you go out on your bike doing dangerous stunts, you're more likely to harm yourself than if you sit on your couch all the time. But then if you sit on your couch all the time playing computer games, then this is also going to lead to health problems. So we need a bit of everything. What we're looking for is this simple thing which is so hard to define, which is people in good health. They have good mental sort of, I don't know, I don't want to put mental, let's just say they're mentally healthy. They're physically healthy. They have enough to eat. They live in a good, safe environment. And all of this helps build their immune system, which means that they can cope with the virus when it comes. All of these sort of communicable diseases are going to affect us in one way or another. There are several different types, and let's have a look at what those are and what our chances are of getting them and what we can do about them. So let's start with basically what's called a pathogen. Let's work out what our pathogens are. We have the virus. We have bacteria. But to go along with these, we've also got a couple of other ones that sort of throw their sort of hand in and try and cause some problems to us. So we've also got fungi, and we've also got protists. Of perhaps all of these, protists are probably some of the worst. They're the hardest to sort of get rid of because they are so similar to us. Fungi are more like plants, and so we can kill them. Bacteria, we were doing really well against bacteria until they've upped the game. And the virus, well, there's a lot of problems with viruses. And the basic problem with a virus is that it's not alive. So killing it is almost certainly out of the question. Let's look at viruses and bacteria and see the difference between them. I'm going to deal with bacteria first. Bacteria are normally just things which are single cells. They come equipped with everything they need. They reproduce by basically dividing in two. We call it binary fission. They split. So we've got binary fission. They split in two. And how they usually damage you is they produce toxins. So a particular bacteria gets into you. Let's suppose we get a simple Staphylococcus infection. Staphylococcus infections often go for the throat. So if you've got a sore throat, you might have a Staphylococcus. The name coccus means basically egg shape. It is sort of a round shaped bacteria. We get other bacteria that are sort of long and thin. We get which are rod shaped ones, and we get some others that are very interesting sort of hybrid type of shapes. They basically look at you and say, wow, aren't you wonderful? I fancy a bit of you. Let's see, what are you? Well, you've got all the things that a bacteria wants. You're warm, and they like a nice, gently warm environment to grow in, which is going to protect them. Inside, you're dark, and they don't like sunlight. It can kill them. So many of them are happy to be inside you, and they can be sheltered by you. So you're warm, it's dark, they like some water, and you're made up of 60-70% water, so they've got an ample supply of water, and you're made of food, which is what they want to eat. So you are absolute heaven to a bacteria. What it wants. There's usually a side effect on it because they don't give anything away for free. No, they're growing, and what they try to do is grow as much as possible. Many bacteria live in and on you. I've read studies that suggest about 2 kilograms of your body weight made up from bacteria. There's an interesting story about mothers nursing their children, and a newborn susceptible to all sorts of things, so it's best that they're fed on the breast, and that way the mother can transfer over some of her natural immunity to the baby. But inside the milk there's actually a chemical which the baby can't digest. But it can be eaten and digested by a particular sort of bacteria that doesn't cause any harm to you. This encourages that bacteria to grow in the child's gut. That doesn't sound good, but it is. Why is it good? Because while all the friendly bacteria is growing, there isn't space for other harmful bacteria to grow. It's survival of the fittest, it's competition. So this bacteria can take over a lot of the baby's gut, stopping other infections getting a foothold. And that gives rise to healthy individuals, because those bacteria can also be digested by the body. Let's look at, in turn, the virus. Often when I'd start talking about viruses, many students wouldn't know much about them, but at the moment, if I ask most students to think of a virus, they can come up with one called a coronavirus. And this generally is known for causing the common cold. And everyone's probably had the common cold. It's a very successful virus. It can manage to get into people quite easily because it's transferred by sneezing and droplets and people breathing it in. It survives by landing on surfaces and being picked up, and then people touching their face and getting the virus into the body. And the common cold's been going on all my life, and people have been trying to get rid of it, vaccines, all sorts of things, and so far it's all failed. And there'd probably be an awful lot of money in making a sort of vaccine to try and stop the common cold. So what is a virus and how does it work? Well, there are 2 sorts of virus. Let's take one of them, and let's not take coronavirus. I'll do that one second. A virus consists of a piece of DNA, and this is inside a protein coat. Some of the viruses are rather unique in shape. I remember working on a particular virus that had this sort of complex sort of shape, and it would have then a different protein, and it's got sort of legs that enable it to stick onto something, and this is called a bacteriophage. It is a virus that affects bacteria, and basically here's our protein coat with our DNA in there. It's got a nice little bit of cutting gear, and it's got some legs which it can do to attach to the bacteria. But most of them are just spheres with bits stuck onto them, and these bits that stick onto them, if you like, little spikes, these they use to attach to cells. And as it attaches to the cells are fooled by these things because they attach to something which makes the cell think it's something useful, because normally other chemicals come to that and they're brought into the cell. So the virus is then brought into the cell, where it then removes its protein coat. The DNA makes its way to the nucleus, and when it arrives in the nucleus, it basically takes over all the cell machinery, and that leads us to make lots of virus. And that's a common type of virus. Coronaviruses are a little bit different. We know a little bit about the coronavirus. It's got on it these little attachment points, and we've managed to look at the structure of these, and this is all over the surface. So these are basically protein, and it's used to attach basically to the cell, and this is how it gets taken into the cell. This particular coronavirus has a lipid component to make its shell. Now this is quite effective normally, because things are expecting a protein to try and destroy them, and this has got a lipid, and that's not going to work. But we do know this is, I was going to write killed, I'm not, this is just going to be destroyed or dissolved, I suppose, is another way of looking at it, by things like soap. Inside here we don't have a piece of DNA, but instead we have a piece of RNA. So I better tell you a little story. And the story is that in your cell you have DNA. Your DNA is copied to a chemical called RNA. And this DNA lives in the nucleus, and the RNA is a single-stranded molecule, not like the famous double-stranded DNA, but a single-stranded, and it can move from the nucleus into the cell, where it can basically be copied in a different way. We're going to use the word translated into protein. Now, where does this virus come? Well, instead of making DNA, which is going to be copied into RNA, which is then going to be translated into a protein, this one arrives and can arrive in the cell, and as soon as it arrives in the cell, it can start translating into protein. This way it's bypassing going into the cell. It also comes with its own little enzyme, and this is an enzyme that takes our RNA and copies it to become DNA. This is an enzyme that biologists use a lot because it's incredibly useful for doing all sorts of making genes, which we'll look at in another lecture. But this RNA comes with a special enzyme called reverse transcriptase. And reverse transcriptase simply takes RNA and uses the cell machinery to make DNA. And then that DNA can, of course, go and make more RNA. And it's bypassing some of the systems in the body to try and protect the cell. We talked about having an immune system. Your immune system works in basically three ways. We've got one form, which is we've got a basic protection. This consists of things like your skin, things like your body produces various viral, antibacterial type of enzymes that can actually destroy all sorts of viruses and bacteria. So we've got a basic one that is a, if you like, a kill all. It does not very specific. We've got then inside the blood system your white blood cells, and the white blood cells operate on a hunt and destroy system. They know what they're looking for, they hunt it down, and they destroy it. When we get a new bacteria, a new virus, then the body has to learn about these, and once it's learnt, then these white blood cells become effective. But little known, there is another type of immune system, and this is an in-cell type of immune system, and it's pretty effective. If every virus that gets into your body could get into your cell, you'd be dead. So we've got some in-cell systems, and these aren't known that well. Why? Well, they're much harder to study. But these in-cell systems do destroy lots of viruses. And some viruses try to beat this system by bypassing the normal way that these viruses work. We're looking at, with all of these things, an arms race. The virus is rather good at the first bit of this arms race. Instead of being something that we killed, it's now something that can't. So the body made defences. So the virus has to come up with some counter body defences. And then your body has to come up with something that can counter those. And then the virus can come up with other things to try and get into the cell. And once inside the cell, then your body's got in-cell defences, and then the virus starts to work out ways to counter those. What makes a virus hard, and in fact bacteria, reasonably hard to kill is how fast they can change. If they didn't change, then we wouldn't have a basic problem. Every 100 or so years, it seems that something's happened. 100 years ago, we had Spanish flu. This was similar to ordinary flu, but different. Everyone was relatively resistant to Spanish flu, to ordinary flu. Spanish flu was a different variety, and it bypassed the defences. And in around about 1919, 1920, that sort of period of time, more people died than in the whole of the First World War. And it preyed on everyone that had survived after the war. Now, 100 years after that, we're looking at coronavirus, a different one that's coming in. And this doesn't seem to be quite as effective as the Spanish flu, but it certainly is fairly deadly. What could we do to combat Spanish flu? Nothing. Medicine didn't exist in enough sort of quality to try and do anything to try and stop it. We had very little idea about viruses and how they were communicated in those days. We learnt a lot then. Now we've got a much better idea, but we still have a problem about how this is spread. They all spread in different ways, but basically we've got three ways. The most deadly is when something is airborne. Coronavirus is and can do airborne. Not very effectively, it's not as good as some, but it's not too bad. It can come out with a sneeze or a cough, and it causes people to cough, which enables it to be transmitted easily. When you sneeze or cough, then there is an area around you which is liable to have the droplets. Just because somebody sneezes in this direction, we have to remember that if there's wind, we've got movement of air, then it can go in all directions. And our best scientific knowledge now is this is around about 4 meters for this particular virus, which is why we've got the 2 meter rule. And if you're outside of that, then the likelihood of the sneeze reaching you, it's more likely to hit the ground. But some people can sneeze better than others, and we might be able to get this up to about 10 metres or so away. And if it's windier, it might be carried. So sneezing, coughing, not particularly helpful. But it can also come out with people breathing, just normally. You don't have to cough, which is why we've got some ideas about masks. Masks aren't that effective on normal people trying not to get the virus. It's much more effective on someone who has got the virus to stop them sneezing, coughing out. But then they've often got problem breathing, and wearing a mask isn't going to help that problem. So someone else nearby, they breathe in the droplets and then they've got the virus. 2 meters is just a number. It's where we think we're going to get the most likely amount of virus, but it can spread. And it can also spread by direct contact. Now, direct contact is literally when you touch someone or something. So as soon as you touch, then if this person has a virus on them, then you can get that. And as long as it stays outside, it's reasonably okay. But as soon as you touch your face, then there's a problem. Many years ago, when I was working in schools, I had a very nice experiment I did with the students. And I did this with a simple bacteria. And I did it with a coloured bacteria. Now, what I would do is I put some on my hand. And I put my hand down on a surface. I touch the surface and we've got this virus now, or bacteria, on the surface. And if someone comes along and puts their hand on there, they can then pick up this virus too. And then it's on their hands and they've only got to touch. Then you can do that. What I would do was I then got the students to then put their hand on a petri dish, and we could then grow up the culture to see whether they'd managed to get the bacteria transferred. We took safety precautions, of course. As soon as we'd done that, we had to wash our hands to try and make sure we can get rid of the bacteria, the virus. So we've got direct contact and air. Another way, of course, is waterborne. Fungi spores are carried in splashes of water. We can find that eating raw, undercooked or contaminated food, or drinking water containing some sort of sewage can spread diseases like diarrhea, cholera, salmonella, and the pathogen enters your body through the digestive system. Once it's in the body, then we can have a problem to try and deal with this. So what have we got to try and get around this? Well, what governments talk about is something called herd immunity. So what is herd immunity? Well, let's have a look and see what we mean by this. I've got someone who is infected, and we'll draw them in red. Now, near them are some other people, and these people are well. This person sneezes, then this person, this person, this person, this one and this one could all potentially get the virus. And this here is going to give me an R factor of here 5. This person is giving this to 5 others. But let's look at a different situation. Here's our person that's ill, but we've got some other people around who have been perhaps vaccinated against this particular virus. And then along comes someone who hasn't. This person can try to give out the virus to the other people, but it's not going to transfer onto these because they're not going to pick it up. So if we draw the same situation here, what's the chance of this person getting it? It's going to be pretty high. What's the chances of this person getting it with herd immunity? And because there are so many people who are vaccinated who won't pick up the virus, or who have had the virus already, then the chance of passing it on is much lower. And that's what we normally hope is going to work with most viral and bacterial infections. And that is giving me here hopefully an R0, or probably something like about 0.1 or less. Herd immunity is great, and we use this for dealing with most diseases. But when we get a new disease, we don't have any herd immunity, this can go right through the population. And we may have the odd soul who is either resistant to it or who's had it that won't get it. But this is why we're having things like social distancing, because if we have our social distancing, here is our infected person, but if we've got everyone else a fair distance away, or in fact even in their own homes, so they actually don't meet up with this person, then the likelihood of them getting this disease is reduced. And we might find that we get the odd transference, but it's nothing as high as if we don't have the social distancing. The most effective way of stopping the coronavirus is certainly doing one thing. If you are infected, washing your hands kills, destroys the virus. Once it's in you, it's up to your body defences to try and see what it can do to stop them. And that depends on your immune system and how good you are, and to a certain extent, I suppose, how lucky you're going to be. So that's about how we start with communicable diseases, and some information there on coronavirus, and a little bit about how it's transferred. Next time we'll go and have a look at more on what this means to you. Until then, if you found this useful, please subscribe, and I'll see you same time next week. Take care, stay safe, goodbye.